was like a last minute thing. So, Monday morning's a hard time for people to check their email early enough to get to where they need to go. So just to kind of give you a rundown of what we're going to do, we're going to, I'm going to introduce our visiting writer, and then we'll have a quick 15-minute reading. She'll read from her work, of course. Then we'll open up to audience Q&A, and she's happy to answer any questions about writing or the writing life or craft or whatever. And then we'll end up with a signing. So we have free books up here, so you can grab a free book, get it signed by the author. And and we also have free student magazines and pens and all that kind of stuff out there in the vestibule. So if you want to get that on the way out, that'd be awesome too. All right, so I'll just start off by introducing our visiting writer, and I'll say here are 8 fast facts about Sarah Thankam Mathews. 1, she grew up between Oman and India, immigrating to the U.S. at 17. 2, while living in Washington, D.C., she worked at a public affairs firm before quitting to pursue an MFA at the Iowa Writers Workshop, where she's currently a visiting professor this semester. 3, while living in New York during COVID, she founded the mutual aid network Bed-Stuy Strong, which raised $1.2 million in grassroots donations and supported over 28,000 New Yorkers with food and other survival necessities. 4, her story, Rubber Dust, was published in Kenya Review and later included in Best American Short Stories 2020, and personally I think it was the best story out of the anthology. Number 5, also during the pandemic, she abandoned a novel she'd been working on for 7 years to embark on a new writing project, which would eventually become her debut novel entitled All This Could Be Different, a majority of which was written in a few months. And this is the book we have on sale here. So, 6, this debut novel was shortlisted for the Discover Prize, the Aspen Words Literary Prize, was a finalist for the 2022 National Book Award in Fiction, and became a New York Times Editor's Choice, and was named Best Book of the Year by NPR, Vogue, Vulture, Los Angeles Times, Slate, Buzzfeed, and so on. 7, I just added these 2 recently. 7, just last week, she tried to drive to a certain community college until her car started to smoke on the road, stranding her in the middle of nowhere, where she attempted nothing short of hitchhiking to talk to students. That's you guys. Number 8, today, she was able to obtain a ride from one of her students, driving again from Iowa City just to be here with us this morning. So if for no other reason than her generosity and her perseverance, let's give a warm welcome to Sarah Thankam Mathews.
Hey y'all, can you hear me okay? Okay, that was such a lovely introduction. Thank you, Mark. I'm really happy and hyped to be here with all of you. Because this is a more intimate crowd, I would actually love if we could go around and you could tell me your names and if you're studying something, what that is. Is that cool? Can you start?
My name's Colin. I'm an English professor here at the APT campus.
Okay, awesome.
My name's Carter, and I'm a high schooler, and I'm just taking some classes so that I can get this out of the way.
Nice, dope.
I'm Robin. I'm just doing some gen ed studies at the moment.
I'm Guillermo. I'm a business major.
I'm Mike, and I'm just taking up space.
Nice. It's me most of the time, honestly.
I'm Eliza, and I'm taking general education.
My name's Olivia. I'm getting my Associate of Science. I'm on a pre-vet track.
And I'm Jim Stick. I'm the Dean of Design, Media, and the Arts, formerly Dean of Liberal Arts, formerly English teacher who actually taught creative writing, actually worked on this. I'm so pleased you're here.
Oh, I'm pleased to be here.
I spent 11 years in Iowa City, too, by the way.
Wonderful.
My name is Drew. I'm a business major.
You said
Drew.
Okay. Sorry, I guess I'm not being very focused in how I'm doing eyes. Yeah.
How about I'll go? My name is Steve. I am working on an education degree focused in special education.
I'm Eric, and I'm working on a biology degree.
Hi, I'm Rashida. Anyway.
Rashida and I drove here together. Rashida's a writer who lives in Iowa City. Is a couple of years out from the workshop.
Thank you.
I'm Chad. I'm just doing general ed.
Awesome. Well, it's lovely to be here with all of you. I come from a family where teaching in some form is probably like the most common profession in the like wide extended family, whether that's like kindergarten or high school or like teaching college. And my mom teaches at a community college and has for many years, and community colleges are important to me for that and many other reasons. I'm going to start by reading just the first chapter of my novel, which is very short, and then because I think we have 15 minutes to kill, I will jump forward and read something from the middle, just to give you a little bit of texture. All this could be different. A1. I would like to tell a story of a different time. I was 22, a teak switch of a girl. I had finished college. There were not many jobs. The economy had punctured like a tire. Obama had won a second term. He said, jobs, healthcare, national healing. He said, Trayvon Martin could have been my son. I was moved by this, thought that sort of imaginative exercise bravery. I would listen to his speeches on NPR as I dressed for work. I had found a job. This set me apart from my college friends. I was a consultant or going to be. This despite my RD degree. A consultant in training. 3 toddlers hiding in a suit. I did not consider myself a sellout. What I felt was that I had been saved from drowning. My classmates without jobs had moved in with their parents, were working unpaid internships at noble nonprofits. I wished them well. My parents were not with me, had left me to make my way in the new country. I was glad they did not, for now, need me to send them money. They had before. My client was a baobab of a corporation, Fortune 500. They made car seats, heating units, pedometers, batteries. My boss demanded I wear pantyhose. You are a contractor, he told me, no benefits. Women who work for me wear makeup, that is how it is. My men wear suits. You must dress better than the clients always. That is how they know we work for them. We get the clients to their definition of success. People only want to hire a guy when they want to be him a little. Remember that. Try some makeup. Just a little. Nothing tardy. I listened dutifully. The pay was only okay. Billable contractors' wages, this despite the 50-hour weeks. I had to file self-employment taxes. But my boss liked me. Early on, he called me his rock star. This was funny to me, since in actuality, rock stars get on stage, perform, sleep with many girls, wreck the hotel room. I, meanwhile, sweated competence, a hungry efficiency. It waxed my arms, radiated deference, never met a Gantt chart I didn't like. He had first offered me $19 an hour. His firm was tiny, only 9 people. I said, "Thank you, I will think on it." I walked to a good restaurant in my college town and drank a full glass of white wine in the middle of the afternoon. I called him back. I said, "Hello, Peter. I have another offer, but I want to work with you. Would you consider 30? In the space between the gin bottles, the mirrored bar showed me a soft-featured girl, skin the color of Hennessy, eyes vacant with fear. My boss said, like a god granting a boon, 23 an hour. You'll relocate to Milwaukee, where your client is. I will pay for your apartment. That sounds great, I said. May have added, I'm honored to get to work for you. All nonsense. Once I hung up, I punched the air and yelled. I remember the restaurant as deserted, but it may not have been. This is not a story about work or precarity. I'm trying, late in the evening, to say something about love, which for many of us is not separable from the other shit. As the summer began, I moved to Milwaukee, a rusted city where I had nobody, parents 2 oceans away. I lay on the sun-warmed wood floor of my paid-for apartment and decided I would be a slut. So that's the first chapter. You get the idea. So I'm going to jump forward. And as I move, because I was using my phone to hold my page number, which is always a bad idea for those of you who read in public or will read in public for the future. I think the only things that are really important to know between what I just read and what I'm about to read are that our main character moves to Milwaukee, starts to set her life up, joins this newfangled invention of the time, because this book is set in 2013, so it's a period piece. And the newfangled invention is dating apps. And she starts to meet people and work, and sort of slowly, her life begins to thicken around her in a way that I think many people who leave college for the working world start to experience. So first your life is in limbo, and then it starts to attain a certain kind of normalcy and routine and stability. And at some point, she starts to fall for this magnetic, kind of troubled ballet dancer called Marina. And the scene I'm about to read is after a lot of will they, won't they, running into each other, missing each other, my protagonist, whose name is Sneha, goes on her first date with Marina. So I'm going to read from that. In the end, we stayed away from seafood. We ordered bulbous glasses of jammy, then bitter red wine, fried tomatoes, a salad topped with perfect little dominoes of beefsteak, a risotto full of corn and leeks, new to me, green and oniony. We spoke about work, mostly hers. I gave her the old "what is change management consulting" rundown. But mostly, I talked about Tom and Tig, my friends. Incandescent, funny, perpetually broke, stretching each paycheck out like chewing gum until the snap. I asked her how she liked Milwaukee. Yeah, so I've hated a lot of my time here, she said. My breakup was not pleasant. I haven't made many friends. But it's been great to make a good amount of money, live in a very nice apartment. My time in Milwaukee has been mostly work and then, wine and reading and TV, maybe trying to not kill my new plants. Struggle City. What are you reading? I asked. This book called Never Let Me Go, she said. At first I was going to give up on it, but all of a sudden there was one part that almost made me cry, and I love to cry. Sometimes I think I should be a professional crier. Anyway, I've kept with it. It's by a Japanese author. I only lived in Tokyo for a year, with a dance company, but ever since then I've always noticed Japanese books in bookstores, and you could say I may be drawn to them. I think Ishiguro is British, I said, more snobbish than I meant to sound. I think he spent his whole life in the UK. She looked a little discomfited, shrugged. I watched the delicate muscles in her neck work as she chewed her steak. Her eyelashes were so long, I questioned how she saw clearly. To occupy the lull, I said, I've never met anyone who loved crying. Oh, she said, I think it's the best. We feel so much, most of us, and different layering things, you can't only feel one thing ever, Can you think of a time when you've only felt one thing at a time? I think crying allows us to midwife our more intense, more complicated emotions, get them outside of our bodies, and then our bodies feel light and free again. Dance allows me to do that, but you can't dance about everything. My boss was a huge bitch to me last week, hard to dance about that. I don't cry often, I said, but when I do, I make myself stop very quickly. I don't know if I've had the experience of getting it out of my system the way that you're describing. You just need to sit with it. Get it all out, she said. Maybe you need a surrogate crier. Maybe, I said. Are you offering? I'll be so good, she said. I'll sit and just cry my heart out for you. I'll even give you a special discount. You're an important consultant, lady. It'll be good for my business. She paid the check, was insistent about it. During our date, she had not touched me once, had not complimented my looks or what I wore. I tried not to let in a rush of grievance at this. On the way out, we stopped in the vestibule of the Wicked Hop, uncertain. Our shoulders brushed, puffy jacket against felted wool. Outside, the world was fogged with cold, was dark and wet and indistinct. Yeah, so I like talking to you, she said. And just like that, my mood improved threefold. Want to continue? I asked. We could go some other place, only if you want. I don't have any clients to cry for tomorrow, she said, so yes, that could work, maybe, lead the way. At Swig, the wine bar down the street, we set up. I sat on a bar stool. She wedged her knees in between mine. I was past tipsy. I began to hear my heart beat, its insistent ascent in my skull. To calm my nerves, I began to talk faster, talk in short, compressed bursts between swigs. We talked about places in Milwaukee we'd been to and liked, shared reminiscences about the pint, the lesbian bar I had been to. She recommended La Cage, a small gay dance club. She was more forthcoming than I was, talked at a cheerful clip, drank more wine while seeming unaffected by it. We, or she, went on about how much she liked Indian food. About White Oleander, the book we both had in common on our dating profiles. It's probably because I have mommy issues, she said with a smile. What is your mother like? I asked, surprising myself. Marina looked taken aback for an instant. She took a long swill of her glass of white. My mom, she said, pensive. She has a potty mouth and a good heart. She loves tanning. The amount she goes is skin cancer waiting to happen. I guess I inherited that, though I believe in moderation. So, I don't know, sometimes she's very Polish, and the rest of the time she's very Italian. What does she do? I asked, for work. When I was a very little kid, she was stripping to make rent, and from some hazy memories, I suspect she did a lot of blow. Wow, your face right now. I want to take a picture of it. I'm sorry, I said, trying to modulate said face into a receptive and appropriate blankness. Go on. Where was I? Yeah, so frankly, not always mom of the year, Marina said. Those years she sucked, probably. Here's something funny. From my dumb child point of view, my mommy was always disappearing to dance, right? So I kept telling everybody, I want to dance like my mommy. Very awkward. So yeah, she got one of her clients to pay for the classes, sent my butt over to ballet, and the rest. No way, I said. Oh, yes. Anyway, I was excellent. Teacher called her and told her every week. She's a proud mama. She runs a daycare in the Jers. She cleaned up a game, got engaged to a police officer, and actually, here's a good story. It was at her goddamn bridal shower that someone outed me. Just told her I was gay. Air caught in my throat. I said nothing at all. Marina continued. So yeah, she came looking for me and asked me flat out. I was so scared, but I was like, yes, it's true. My God, Marina, I said. What did she do? Girl, she walked up to the table where everyone was lining up to take a plate and just yelled. Hey, everyone, my mom goes. Everyone, listen up. My daughter is a faggot. And I am 19, just dead with embarrassment. But my mom keeps going at 600 decibels. She's like, okay, and I love her. I love her. And if any of you have a problem with my kid being a fucking faggot, come talk to me and we'll take it outside. Okay, now keep drinking. Marina laughed, a closed-mouthed, crinkle-eyed chuckle at this memory. My eyes were burning. I blinked hard, turned my face away, pretending to get something from my bag until it seemed safe. What about your parents? Marina asked. They're no longer with me, I said, feeling the pain inside bear down upon my lungs, thinking of the mudded orange footpath, tiny ferns slipping out into the air between sharp gray stones, of what it would mean if my parents had ever done what Marina's mother had, shouted out, hey, my kid is a faggot, and I love her, and not cared who heard. I took a great gulp of wine, felt its sourness in my teeth. She looked so sorry, so tender, a small hand on my back. I realized on the way to the bathroom what had happened, what a shocking lie I told. It made things simple, though, as lies can. My parents were no longer with me. My parents were no longer with me. My parents were no longer with me. There were all the ways in which it was true, in which it freed. As I washed my hands in the small two-stall, lit by a single yellow filament in a dusty bulb, and tried to slow my heart sprinting, Marina came in. When I walked away from the sink, my body pressed against hers. She peered up at me. Blade nose, dear eyes, a sharp, painful prettiness. She was smaller than me, all bone and tendon. I could feel her hot breath on my face. "Your skin is so beautiful," she said very softly. All night, I can't stop looking at it. Her mouth smelled of wine. No one had ever told me anything like this. I leaned down. I kissed her. Soft first, and then furious, hoisting her body up, pushing it against the metal stall door, which only banged slightly, her arms around my neck, the cleft of her sex hot against mine, even through black denim, and we ground into each other like glass, her tongue in my mouth, mine in hers, silent other than breaths, warm and ragged, and I felt dizzied by all of it, by how, in my hands, her hips felt like the time I found an animal's skull in the underbrush of my family's home when I was a child and lifted it into the air, this hard, breakable animal thing. A knock on the door. We pulled apart, laughing softly, disheveled. "Let's get out of here," she said, and took my hand. Thank you.
All right, let's open up to some questions. Steve, you want to open this off?
So a lot of times in our creative writing classes, we talk about how no draft is really truly final. You're always kind of reworking it. As a published author, how do you know when it's, I guess, good enough to start sending it in, to start shopping it around?
That's such a good question. I think that the first and most important thing is that you have to be satisfied. I think that there's so much pressure now that didn't exist like 2 decades ago to like almost like try to microwave your own success as an author, right? Like as a writer. You hear all these stories all the time. I think many of them, there's a lot of opacity about like how work actually gets made, how long it actually takes. And so I think that you can feel this sense of pressure of a like, okay, I have a draft, I'm gonna edit it to try to get it to like a decent place, and then maybe I should start talking to an agent. And what, like, the first and most important thing is like everyone is on their own individual paths, and when anyone is answering a question like this, they're actually talking about themselves, right? And for myself, what was important and useful and good was I needed to get to a point where I loved the work. Like I wanted to, in some ways I'm an easily embarrassed person. And so one of the things that I did think about was was how bad I would feel in a sort of hypothetical scenario where I got something published and then I picked that book up, 2 years later and was like, oh my God, I hate this and I see all its flaws. Like I sort of wanted to avoid that situation. So I wanted to like love the work with the sort of scenario test of like, if I was to pick this up in a bookstore, would I keep reading it, And then I sent it to first 5 and then an additional like 3 other people, so 8 people in my life who are readers in some ways. Like a couple of them were writers that I met while going to Iowa, but many of them were my friends, and one of the things that was important to me actually was with this book, which, deals so much with the reality of working lives in this country. I wanted to send it to my friends who are not in any way connected to literary anything, and in fact like my friends who worked like hard jobs and had kids, and their reading time was really like the time spent on the subway or like for like an hour in the mornings, like there's sort of like the precious time that most working people have for anything related to art. And so after I had this round of readers who gave me feedback, and the feedback was candid because I asked them to be very candid, and they were like, I got really bored on page 30, and I was like, okay, bet, let's see what's up on page 30. And then after that process, after integrating those edits, I read it one more time, and I was like, liking anything is subjective, but I really like this book. And that's the point in which I felt ready to start talking to agents. That's when I started querying.
Thank you very much.
Of course. What other questions do y'all
I
have?
was going to speak to, go ahead.
I just have a question about, like, I'm an older millennial, I'm wondering if you can talk about writing a period piece, like this, when you were talking about this era, like, I feel like the years of Obama were like ones of great hope, but also for our generation were absolutely shitty for the working conditions and everything that we went through. I mean, after the Great Recession in 2008, I graduated college in 2008.
Oh my God.
Horrible. And so I'm wondering if you can, I don't know, about like, it's also weird, like you call it a period piece, usually when people call it period pieces, it's like, that's like 100 years ago, you know what I mean? This is like a recent past, and I'm wondering about like, how do you write about the very recent past? How do you write specifically for kind of an audience who like, I don't know, you started talking, like when you're talking about like the NPR interviews and everything, is like the anxiety in me just started to rise, you know what I mean? So I'm wondering about that like generation, like what are your responses from the millennials? What does this look like to write like, yeah, the recent past of this both good and bad time? Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, yeah, I love this question. First of all, the period piecing is a joke, but a joke with like a very, I think, meaningful kernel of truth to it. You know, it's also funny, like it's my own way of being self-deprecating because I, have gone through my life with a giant Peter Pan complex. Like I feel very young, and then every now and then, like, I will be like humbled by my like Gen Z sister, and so that. Yeah, exactly. And so I think like it's a joke, but also a kernel of truth. Yeah, I think that there's so much that's very interesting about your question. I would say that I'm like I'm a middle-aged millennial, not an elder millennial. I'm like so I graduated in like 2013, and I think that the second Obama term was very meaningfully different at a cultural level, at a zeitgeist level than the first Obama term. The first Obama term marked my entry into this country, and I really remember it and hope to write about it someday. But I think to answer your question the most succinct and productive way I can, right? I think that we all have to contend with the fact that like we are living in accelerated time. History is happening faster, like events are happening faster, technology is accelerated, and so you could be writing something set in 2021, and by the time if you finished it this year and by the time it like reached markets, it would already be history. And so I think my take on that is you have to try to speak deeply to the present no matter what. Like if I'm writing, like the thing I'm writing right now is like set in the late 90s, but it is deeply in conversation with the present. Like whatever you're feeling compelled by, transported by, a sense of urgency around in the present, use the past to talk about that is part of my approach. And then I think you have to like try to remember detail, right? And not just, I think not just like material detail or cultural detail, which is helpful and important if you're trying to create a world, but like what it felt like. And that's why I think memory is like a really useful tool for any of us as writers. It like is what allows us to like move around in time and have any kind of control over time. And I really think like my theory of fiction is like nothing more and nothing less than the transmuting of time into prose in a way that other people can travel in and like hopefully enjoy.
I just want to do a follow-up to a previous question about like doneness, right? And you were talking, you mentioned in the intro that you were working on a long project, a novel, for several years, and you decided to kind of like abandon it. How did you know that was not going anywhere, or like what made you choose to abandon it? And what was the process of like writing something completely new? Writing this book?
Yeah, I will attempt to do something I'm so bad at, as y'all can see, which is like give a short answer. So Mark is right. I worked on the book for 7.5 years. It was the book that I envisioned would be like my first book. I just really only thought of one book ever, and I really put so much of myself, my life, like into this novel. Like it, like in so many ways, like read as like more or less naked biography, and then like an additional like 35 years of like invented future for this character. Like, so it was like, a big chunky book, it was like 700 pages of attempt. And at some point I just realized that there was like too much there, but I just like didn't have something that writers really need in maturity, which is control. I think that I would like my emotional needs when it came to that project, my emotional need to see myself for once like made visible, to see myself like made intelligible, to see the place that I had grown up, captured in some way. All these things were like, and then I also was trying to say some stuff about America and politics and immigration, and there was so much in this project that the project was bloated, like kind of beyond repair. And I think I also was too young a writer to know how to edit well, and so I just didn't know. Like I think now I could, if I really wanted to, I still felt like really transported by the questions of that project. I would go back and be like, here's a scalpel, this is getting cut, and like literally here are like 3 books that could come out of it because it was like literally that dense. But mostly I just read it after a certain point, you know, the 7th year of working on it, and I was like, I don't want to read this. And that felt really heartbreaking, you know, because it's like, if you don't want to read it, how the hell else are you going to convince anybody to spend time with it? And yeah, I think I went through this period of grieving. I went through this period where I like stopped writing for a little bit. And a lot of this was in early 2020, where like the world was going to shit in any case. And so there were other things that occupied my time. In your introduction, you mentioned some of the organizing that I did, like the organization I like helped found. And that took up a lot of my time. And then at some point, I was just like, I miss writing. And I have an idea for what I thought was like 10 pages of this like short story that wasn't going anywhere. The short story that I was calling Milwaukee. And I was like, there's something there. It's not a short story, but there's something alive. And what I really recommend, like what I want all of us as like artists to do more of is like, pay attention to what the work itself is telling us. Like we have so many ideas. Like we're like often like trying to like drive the car of the work. But like sometimes like the car itself is telling us something. This feels notable because, you know, on Thursday the car I was in was telling me something, and it finally let me know, you know, through the car filling with smoke. But in less dire ways, yeah. Like I think paying attention to what's on the page, like the page actually has more to teach you than many of us know. So yeah, I left that work behind. I started writing what I thought would be like a 150-page novel. Like I was like, it's going to be called Milwaukee. It's going to be this like slim little blade of a book about like millennials in Milwaukee, the second Obama term. And then it grew a little larger, but I think really benefited from me having like a simple vision for it at the beginning.
Yeah, because that book that you've obviously produced still has all those themes. Deals with like immigration and capitalism and still like big political ideas. So.
You're right.
But how did you? Well, I guess I'm thinking about like how do you approach the political in your book when it comes to like, you know, identity and all the issues that you're trying to kind of like explore. How do they work in art for you?
Yeah, that's interesting. And I mean, I think like it's really true that like, you know, I really think that like no writing, like no practice of your art is wasted. Like I think I wasn't necessarily trying to write about some of the things that I ended up writing about in this book. It just, I think the amount of writing I'd done before, the amount of thinking I'd done before showed up in the lives of the characters in like an almost like unconscious way in some ways, like the immigration through line. I think I was not like consciously trying to do so much with it. And then at the end of the book, I was like, oh, this is a very meaningful theme in the novel, and it is an immigration novel. But I think to answer your question about the political, ultimately, I think that any of us who's trying to like make work that reads as political, we have to find our own language and ways to do it. Like I think that I benefited from reading Emile Zola and like reading some other writers who were writing politically, but I don't know that I copied their approach. I think that the right way to figure out how to do politics in fiction is it's actually really personal. And I think for me, and it has to do with like what you believe the point is, you know? I think that for me, the style of, I think, like talking about politics that I'm interested in is what I think of as like the truly persuasive style, by which I mean I am interested in connecting. I'm not interested in being listened to. And I think that a lot of particularly young writers or writers with very strong points of view who are just like, I'm right, you know, when it comes to politics, and I'm going to convince you of this by being didactic, right? By like sort of soapboxing about what I think. I think sometimes, depending on how good they are at doing that, like I think that they can be seductive on the page, but at the end of the day, the experience that I have reading that kind of writing is the feeling of being talked at, not to. And I am, like, my school of thinking, like my theory of fiction is like all about connection. You know, it's all about this idea that like we are moved by what we feel much more than what we think. And so I was just more interested in trying to, in this novel, rather than show anyone with all the answers or anyone who acts perfectly at all times, I was so much more interested in trying to create this like flawed everyman of a main character and having the novel sort of broaden out into like a group portrait of like young people who are forging community like through like love and struggle and who have different opinions from each other and are talking to each other. I was just so much more interested in what can happen at the level of dialogue than anyone standing up on a soapbox and being like, well, you know, I have all the answers and you are so dumb and this is how you should think.
Just a quick question. I was reading a review about Ralph Ellison's Invisible Man, you know, which was a monstrously successful work, and then the struggles that he had the rest of his life, and he left a lot of incomplete things he just didn't complete, and they tried to put them together, and it never was that successful. But he too was living in rarefied times politically, but it seemed like what happened afterwards almost became debilitating in a very strange way. So I guess my question is, you read your novel, you got over it, and you moved on, and it's kind of fascinating because he wrote a very successful piece and then just never, ever, you know, came back after working years and years diligently.
Do you ever feel that kind of pressure too?
I mean, I think I benefit from not dealing with the level of profound success or profound racism that that Ralph Ellison had to deal with, right? I mean, I think that I feel lucky in a variety of ways, and in one complicated way, I feel lucky that this novel has received like warmth and affection, and like that it's been critically acclaimed, and I'm so grateful for that. But it also has not been this like coronation either, you know? Like it's not like it's been a bestseller that it's like swept everything. Like I think that can sometimes happen to writers before they're ready, and I don't think I would have been ready. And so yeah, I mean, I think the way that I live my life is like I think I move through the world like thinking of myself as like a profoundly like ordinary regular person, like trying to like live my life, like have my relationships, and like make writing on the side. And like the writing is like a container for me to like think and feel. And the hope is that if I do the right kind of work for enough time, I can let the container that I make move away from me and move out into the world to like live among all of you, and any of you who want to can meet it and do what you want with it, really. But I think that it has really protected me to have that vision of myself. You know, I don't go around thinking of myself as like some like matchless artist. I really have not been thinking in the book I'm working on right now. I haven't been thinking about like trying to like match up to this book, whatever that means. I'm just trying to make something that I find interesting and moving. And I trust that if I do that, which is a hard thing to do, let's be honest, that everything else will follow. I hope that answers your question.
May I ask another one?
Yeah, of course.
I actually have a question more about the identity of your book specifically. Your main character is very clearly queer, either lesbian, bisexual, I'm not sure which, haven't read it yet. But you personally, do you consider this to be queer media? Or is this just a aspect of the character that's part of her greater story?
I mean, it's interesting. Like the most important part of my answer is it's for other people to say. Like I think, like to some degree, I believe in the idea of the death of the author, maybe a little bit. You know, it's like my job is to write it and give it to all y'all, and then you decide. But with that being said, yeah, I think that, you know, this is a queer novel, not just because it has a queer, like, you know, main character, like the form, like I don't want to say like all that much about it to people who haven't read it, but, you know, one part this is actually a little bit of a synthesis between a question you asked and a question you asked. I think one thing that I'm interested in when it comes to politics is I'm interested in how politics can live not just in dialogue but in form, like in terms of like what the movement within a novel or short story is. Like what does it start out as? What does it end up as? And the movement of this novel is somebody who starts out like atomized, alone in so many ways, like believes herself to like be like alone under capitalism, which is not even a concept she like thinks about that much because she's not a very political person, and ends up with like much more understanding of the world, and with this like small loving nest of meaning and relationships. You know, I don't think that's like a huge spoiler, and I think there are critics who've read that movement and the sort of emphasis on found as well as blood family as part of what makes the novel like formally queer. But ultimately, it is for other people to say as well.
I was going to do a follow-up, actually, because we had Kaveh Akbar came through the one a while ago, and he was answering this question about, like, there's two kinds, like, his latest book, he has a queer
Martyr,
Martyr, and then he's like, some writers are like, you know, why does it matter, right, that they're, why does that have to be a situation? And he's like, then there's other writers who are like, it matters. Like, it defines the character, and you can't, like, not ignore it, you know? So I'm wondering how you approach that idea of, like...
Is the question of the it in It Matters, is it that, is the it the character's queerness or the novel as a queer text? Does that make us, like, what is the it?
For me? Like,
Yeah.
what am I... that the character is identified as lesbian. We had this debate in our creative writing workshop sometimes, where people are like, well, they're gay, we should probably make that part of the conflict, and other people are like, no, why does it have to be a conflict? You know?
In that sense.
That kind of...
Yeah, I mean, look, like, I think that like, in so many ways it comes down to, like, your own theory, right? Like, what is it that you believe? Like, I'm so interested in trying to foster a culture where everyone is encouraged to think. I think there are so many things about the world in which we live in where, like, there's this idea that's, like, present in the ether or present in the water that only some people should think and make decisions, and everyone else, like, follows along like automatons. And I'm, like, very much into the idea of, like, a democracy of thinking. So with that caveat, like, it's sort of like you may disagree, you may feel differently, but my feeling is that there are a lot of queer people in the world. Not everyone is queer. I think that one thing that I'm interested in my fiction is capturing something that I feel in my life, which is that most of us wear identity lightly and sometimes heavily, right? Like, not every single one of us at every single moment is like I'm not like walking, you know, to my car being like, as the queer immigrant child of immigrants, you know, like there are times when I be forgetting that shit, you know, like but it's also equally true to say that, like, this is the fact of my life, like the, like, masks of identity we wear, which are masks, also are masks we cannot take off for most of us. They shape our lives. And so for me, I'm interested in, like, writing stuff where, like, characters, like, I mean, because I am queer, a lot of my characters, not all, like, you know, I, like, will write heterosexuality sometimes. I will write characters who are not immigrants sometimes, but on average, like, I think that I'm drawn towards characters who have experienced some of the conflicts that I have, which have shaped my life. But I think that, like, it's so possible to, like, write an immigrant like, to me it's important to write an immigrant character some of the time when immigration is not the, like, grand plot-driven conflict. And I feel the same about queerness too, where sometimes it is, I think for this character, it is such a, I think because her queerness ties into this, like, existential crisis of the self that she feels about having her life split between, like, her, like, the world that she came from before immigration and the world that she's integrating slowly into after immigration. It's extremely important to her. It's, like, you know, it's like the water that she swims in. But I think that I've also written like other characters in stuff that's not yet published, where identity is held lightly, you know, and it's just like a little bit of a, like, this is part of how they are and who they are.
Any other questions? All right, well, that's a great moment to end on, I think. All right, let's give a round of applause.
Thank you all so much.
All right, so, so let's take a second.